Hi, everyone. My name is Kelly. I have a twin brother, Matthew. I was born 3 minutes after he was born, but he has always been considered older than me. Since we were kids, Matthew has acted like a real big brother, guarding and protecting me from everything bad. Our mother was the first to notice our special connection. It happened for the first time when my brother and I were 3 months old and we were separated for a couple of hours. Both of us kept crying unceasingly all the time. We hardly ever parted and spent all our time together from then on. When we got a little older, we started to notice how close we were. We could even feel each other's pain. For example, when I fell down and hit myself, Matthew felt some pain in the place where it hurt me as well. We don't have to be together to know what is happening with the other one. Once, Matthew went to scout camp for a couple of weeks, and I stayed at home. I really didn't want to part with my brother even for a day, but it was a special camp only for those engaged in Thai boxing. A couple of days after my brother left, I had strange sensations in my knee. I told this to my mom right away, and she examined my knee, but didn't see anything wrong. On the same day, we turned to the family doctor. To our surprise, he didn't see anything wrong either. After going to the doctor, my mother even scolded me a little, saying that I came up with the knee pain and distracted her from important household chores. In the evening, the manager of the camp where my brother was called suddenly. He told us that Matthew had an injured knee and he was in the first aid post at that moment. The next morning, my parents and I got into the car and drove to the scout camp. When we arrived, my brother was in very poor condition. His knee was very swollen and he couldn't even walk. I was terribly sorry for him. Besides, it was very strange and weird that my knee hurt the day before, too. There were a huge number of such coincidences. Over time, no one doubted that my brother and I had a special connection. I had the hardest time when Matthew participated in the Thai boxing competitions. Not only was I very worried about my brother, but my whole body hurt on such days as well. Matthew was always physically fit and often won the fights, but he still received blows of varying degrees of severity, and it affected me too. Once, my brother was hit in the head during the competition. After that, I had a headache for 2 days. I was so mad at him. I even cussed Matthew out and asked him to quit the sport because I suffered from his fights too. But he continued, and Matthew had another competition, and all his opponents were weak, so my brother hoped that taking first place would be super easy. That day, I had a lesson in art school. I never went to Matthew's competitions because I felt sick watching stuff like that. Mom couldn't watch my brother's fights either, so my father was in charge of supporting Matthew in the fights. We studied the paintings by Claude Monet at the lesson. I sat at the easel and painted lilies when suddenly I felt sick and fainted. The teacher and other students were shocked. When I came around a few minutes later, I immediately thought that something bad had happened to my brother. I called my dad right away because I knew that he was somewhere near Matthew, but he didn't pick up the phone. When I called my mother at first, she didn't pick up either, and when she did, I heard her crying. She said nothing except that she and Dad were in the hospital. Mom asked me not to panic and to go home. I went home and I was very worried. I didn't understand what had happened, and minutes of waiting turned into hours. Dad finally arrived home. When I saw him, I didn't even recognize him at first. He had always been cheerful and smiling. At that moment, there wasn't a single emotion. He was pale as a ghost. He came in and sat on the sofa without saying a word. I was so scared that I was afraid to even ask him what had happened. A few minutes later, Dad started talking, still gazing into space. He said that something bad had happened to our Matthew. He was very strong, but luck wasn't on his side that day. During the fight, his opponent used a forbidden trick and hit my brother hard in the head. The blow caused a slight cerebral hemorrhage, and Matthew lapsed into a coma. After the word coma, it became hard for me to breathe, as if someone invisible was choking me. I sat on the sofa next to my dad and burst into tears. In a couple of minutes, my dad tried to calm me down, but I was devastated. After crying for a couple of hours, I became completely powerless and really just wanted to sleep. I fell asleep on the couch, resting my head on my dad's knees. At first, my sleep was leaden and troubled, but then I plunged into pleasant relaxation. I woke up in a couple of hours. By that time, my mom had already returned home. She was deadly pale, and her eyelids were swollen from crying. Mom said that Matthew's condition was stable, but he was in a coma, and none of the doctors knew when my brother would recover. They let us stay with my brother for very short periods of time at visiting hours. Suddenly, I remembered that I had a dream about my brother. He came to me in my dream and began to console me and said that he was very sorry for what had happened. Then he told me in detail what that fatal blow was like and how it hurt and how good he felt now. When I told my parents about the dream, my dad was speechless because he had been with Matthew all the time and had seen the fight with his own eyes. My dream was 100% true to life. Honestly, I was shocked by my dream, but it made me feel better. Matthew said that he now felt good and that it didn't hurt anymore. I was very glad to hear that. The next day, I went to visit my brother, my second half. When I came into his room, I saw a lot of tubes that were stuck into different parts of his body. If not for those tubes, one would have thought that my brother was sleeping very soundly. I took my brother's hand and gripped it tightly, but there was no response. People in a coma respond to gripping their hands only in movies. I felt so sad and lonely without Matthew. It felt like I lost my arm or my leg. In a couple of days, Matthew came to me in my dreams again. He asked me to tell our parents how much he loved and missed them. He also complained that it hurt when I gripped his hand in the hospital. When I told my parents about my dream about Matthew again, they simply burst into tears. They by no means doubted that my brother really came to me in my dream. Once, I complained to my brother that my pocket money wasn't enough to buy an upgraded version of the game that I had been a fan of for many years. My parents didn't want to give me money for such nonsense. Matthew felt sorry for me and told me where his stash of cash was. It was a small box under the floor in the attic, which I could have never found by myself. My brother cared for me even while he was in a coma. Half a year passed, and my brother was still in the coma, but my parents and I never stopped hoping that he would recover sooner or later. We believed that the day would surely come when Matthew would open his eyes and smile at us. We managed to stay calm and not to go crazy with grief, only thanks to firm faith. And then this bright moment came. It was a regular Tuesday with its usual routine. Early in the morning, my parents and I were about to leave the house, and I remembered that I wanted my brother to listen to his favorite band. I rushed to the bedroom, took a Walkman, headphones, and a CD. We arrived at the hospital a little early and were asked to wait. While we were sitting in the hallway, I put the CD in the Walkman and listened to the music. The music brought back memories, and I felt so sad. In my head, I asked Matthew to return to us as soon as possible because we missed each other so much. We came into his room, and my brother still lay there and didn't move at all. I came closer, put the headphones on him, and turned on the Walkman to the maximum volume. Suddenly, Matthew made a fist. My parents and I were shocked and breathless for a while. Before we had time to recover from this shock, my brother opened his eyes. He looked at us and smiled. Everything was exactly as I imagined. The first thing he asked was why the music in the Walkman was playing so loudly. After that, there were many tears, a long-term rehabilitation, and all kinds of examinations by the doctors, but it didn't really matter. The main thing is that Matthew was back with us again. By the way, my brother says that he remembers many dreams he had when he was in the coma. He remembers how he talked to me, what he asked me, and what he told me. This is just unbelievable. Do you have an invisible connection with any of your loved ones? Give your answers in the comments. If you liked my story, subscribe to the channel and like it.